Hey there and welcome back to Don't Open That Door. Come along with our triumvirate of terror as we descend into darkness, hurtle into horror, and plunge into peril. If you've ever listened to songs by Korn, you're in the right place. I'm Justin, and I'm looking for someone to share my Pawpaw fruit with me.
Oh, I am Nico, and I would never be in a cult because I would just miss the internet too much.
I'm Dan, and I would probably be in this cult.
Oh no.
And we're here today to review The Wicker Man from 1973. This one was directed by Robin Hardy, starring Edward Woodward, no relation, as Sergeant Howie, Christopher Lee, yeah, that one, as Lord Summerisle, Britt Eklund as Willow, Jerry Cowper as Rowan, and Lindsay Kemp as McGregor, the innkeep. That scoundrel. We open with Sergeant Neil Howie, a Scottish police officer. He pilots a seaplane. That's like one of those planes that can land on the water. And he heads over to a remote island off the coast of Scotland named Summerisle. His charge is to locate a girl named Rowan Morrison. See, she's been missing for months. So he naturally goes around and he asks people, even Rowan's supposed mother. But everyone claims that Rowan doesn't exist. Sounding like another to me, but tell me this, Nico. What happens next?
Well, amazingly, there's a worse school here. So that night, Sergeant Howie spends the night at a local inn. On one of the walls, he notices that there's a picture of a young girl as the local May Queen. But the one from last year is mysteriously missing. He steps outside of the inn and finds that the people in this area are openly partaking in pagan rituals as he runs into a good old hometown local orgy just right out on the quad in the middle of the night. What else are you going to do, I guess? He retreats inside the inn and tries to go to sleep, but the innkeeper's daughter attempts some kind of pagan seduction ritual in the room adjoining his by singing loud as fuck and like humping doors and shit. Luckily, Sergeant Howie is a forthright Christian man who believes in abstinence until marriage. So that saves him this time, and he just goes to sleep.
Indeed. Dan, what happens next?
Well, the next morning, Sergeant Howie witnesses more pagan rituals and rites as he continues his investigation. He makes his way to Rowan's school and finds a school register that she does, in fact, exist. He questions the teacher, who states that Rowan is actually dead. Sergeant Howie wants to exhume the body, but in order to do so, he needs the permission of the eponymous Lord Summerisle. So he heads out to meet him.
And for our listeners out there, eponymous is our SAT word of the day. Gotta keep your vocab in check. Nico, what happens next?
So Lord Summerisle has a conversation with Sergeant Howie wherein he tells him how the island was barren before his grandfather reintroduced the old pagan beliefs. Now the island is blessed and the people have something to believe in. This greatly offends Sergeant Howie's hardcore Christian values as he's not down with this pagan devil worship, but he gets permission to exhume Rowan's body. Irregardless, there's a not real word, and yet also simultaneously a real word, because you know what? All words are made up. There's your own little psychic damage for the day, dear listener.
Nico, that is in fact a Quetzalcoatl. Well, as it
A
turns
what?
out...
Yes, the Quetzalcoatl.
Quetzalcoatlus? Quesadilla?
Well, as it turns out, there is no body in Rowan's
Quentin
coffin.
Tarantino?
Only a hair. This infuriates... I mean, like a rabbit hair, not like a piece of hair. This infuriates Sergeant Howie and only makes him more committed to get to the bottom of things, but not to anyone's bottom. He finds a copy of the missing photo and realizes that it was a picture of Rowan at last year's May Day. He also heads to the local library and reads up on pagan rites and rituals, and he realizes that Rowan is probably alive, and that the island plans to sacrifice her to their pagan gods in exchange for a bountiful harvest. Nico, I'm gonna say you know about that. What happens next?
Sure. The following morning is Mayday, and Sergeant Howie heads back to his seaplane to try and get help. As it turns out, his radio won't work and the plane won't start, meaning he's stranded on the island. Undeterred, Sergeant Howie begins a door-to-door search for Owen, but he cannot find her. Everyone's dressed up in masks and costumes. And Sergeant Howie, in a moment of ingenuity, steals the innkeeper's costume. He was dressed as Punch the Fool in the local menagerie of characters that we've got in the island now. And he then joins the procession. He eventually does find Rowan, and he frees her as they escape through a cave.
Well, I mean, that's positive news, right, Dan? Sounds like we're going to get to a good conclusion.
It is, except that they don't. The islanders are actually waiting for Sergeant Howie on the other side of the cave, and Rowan joyfully runs into their arms. Lord Summerisle explains that this was actually it's a trap, laid out specifically for Sergeant Howie. They needed someone exactly like him, a virgin, a fool, both figuratively and literally, and someone with the power of the king, because he's a police officer. Sergeant Howie frantically tries to explain that killing him will not bring their crops back, but the islanders do not listen. They lock Sergeant Howie in a giant wicker man and burn him alive. The end.
All right. Well, I say we get down to brass tacks. First and foremost, Nico, how's this movie look?
I think that it's got a really beautiful setting. I will say that much. The isle itself is really charming and homey, and like it's got there's a vibe that it's lived in, and just the general scenery is really pleasantly attractive when compared to all the creepy shit that's going on here. So I think it looks pretty good.
Agreed. I think it looks nice. Now, one thing to note is this movie does have a large amount of nudity. So if you are in fact Sergeant Howie and that offends you, you may not want to watch this. But there's just a ton of nudity and also the big phallic imagery, as those who know. But otherwise, yeah, I thought it looked really nice. Dan, thoughts?
Yeah, I thought it looked all right. I mean, it definitely looks like it's from the 70s. It has sort of that 70s filter, if you will, on it.
Yeah.
There's a few scenes that are very like soft looking, like they're in like a dream kind of thing, which I thought was interesting, even though like it wasn't a dream. There's also some scenes where they just kind of like zoom in on different things, like they zoom in on like a bug, or like they zoom in on there's an eyeball on one of the little boats, and they just kind of do that for mysterious, creepy effect, I guess. Didn't really work for me personally, but I mean, overall, I think it looked all right.
That doesn't work for me, brother. But no. All right, well, let's go ahead and switch over to sound now. Nico, do you like barley? And do you like corn?
I love that shit, man.
And let the audience know what I'm talking about when I mention that.
So there is a recurring song in this movie that happens throughout the runtime where there'll just be these real like down home choirs talking about the 30 bags of barley and the 30 bags of corn, 30 bags of grain and something we be fucking, I guess, because there's a lot of fucking in this movie.
Yeah.
So like it's comical, but it's also creepy, which helps the overall atmosphere of just unease and dread, I guess you could say. So like, while it is not something that I would be putting on in the rotation afterwards, it fit the sort of vibes that they were going for.
Dan, I mean, this was really interesting because a lot of these songs were actual folk songs. So how'd you feel about them using like actual folk music and then the sounds in general?
I thought it was cool that they included actual folk music. I think it helped the authenticity of the film and helped me, the viewer, get put into the island and kind of be put into the setting. There's a lot of it. It's almost, I mean, it's not, but it's almost veering on the edge of like a musical. Where, I mean, there's probably
almost
6 or 7, 8 maybe different times throughout the film where they actually just kind of like break out into song for 2 or 3 minutes. So there's a lot of that, which I thought was an interesting choice. Overall, I mean, I thought sound was good.
Agreed. And I also think that one thing for me is there wasn't like the standard horror fare in this movie. So I think sound wise, it stands out a little bit because they didn't have what we would consider to be industry norms, whether it's the
Sure.
orchestra or even the synths, which I think when this movie came out, they weren't really super big yet, but this was cool.
Not in film
just
scoring
experience.
anyway, certainly in music, but not necessarily in film scoring.
Exactly. And I think it was just cool, as you said, to kind of help the immersion, to feel like you're really in the island. And I do want to talk about the Islanders real quick. Do you consider them to be bad people, given everything that they've done?
Let me see if I can phrase this properly. I feel like they weren't bad people until this movie. I think prior to this movie, they were just regular people because it's kind of implied, at least the way I took it, is that they've never sacrificed anybody before. Because Mr. Summer Islander, or whatever his name was,
Lord Summerisle.
Lord Summer Isle, says that this is the first time they've ever had bad crop season. And it doesn't seem like any of the other girls have gone missing before. I think. I mean, they don't come out and say that, but I don't believe so because the human sacrifice is to please the gods when they have bad harvest, but they haven't had a bad harvest. So I think they kind of go through the motions, but don't actually sacrifice anybody. So I don't think they're really bad people until this film when they do sacrifice somebody.
Nico, do you agree with Dan that these are bad people?
I mean, they did kill a guy, right? So they are all 100% complicit, obviously. And to them, it's not like a crime what they're doing, but they still like whole ass killed a guy. So, yeah.
I'm going to sound like a real bad person for saying this. I actually don't think they're bad people. My reason being is they have a system and the system works for them. And if you look at it, they actively chose to get someone that's not local, right? They actively chose to try and get someone that's not a member of their community to come in and, they're just going to take him out the game. And he doesn't have to provide for a family or anything like that. So they did kind of the least harm they could do while still killing a fool, but still had to, do what they did. And within their system of morality, it's okay to do that. And remember, they don't have crime on that island, really. Like, there's nothing bad happening. They don't kill each other on a regular basis. So are they bad people? I'd say no.
All right. So I'm going to let my fridge run out, and then I'm going to kidnap and murder you. And my fridge will repopulate.
It will if you cut me up and put me in your fridge.
It's amazingly not where I expected you to go with that. Man, okay, cool. Love that mental image for me.
I also want to ask, as a general note, what did you guys think about the pagan rituals on display? I will say I did not do a ton of investigation into the authenticity of these rituals. I've just seen some things online saying they are kind of realistic. And there's also that thing at the start where they actively thank the people of the island for showing the culture and stuff like that. So maybe it is realistic, maybe it's not. Unsure, but what do you think about what you saw?
I do appreciate that they put their bona fides like right at the beginning of the movie. I do think that helps ground what we're seeing and make it more believable and just that much easier for us to, suspend our disbelief. So for me, like it's all good for me.
Dan, do you agree with the take on the bona fide? And what is your, specifically, whether it's the field orgy or the fire jumping to try and get yourself more fertile? What'd you think?
I thought it was all fine.
To hear all of that as described as fine is wild.
How so? Okay, you jumped over a fire to become more fertile. Like, maybe that doesn't make sense, but all religion has shit that doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't take away from the fact that there's a lot of wild boy shit in this film. Just because other religions are also wild doesn't mean that this one isn't.
But I think that all depends on your perspective of morality and of what is and isn't wild. To Justin's point, like, obviously to them it's just commonplace, right? So like, I mean, if you think about like in today's society and in current US, like people go outside mostly naked and we're just like, oh yeah, that's totally cool. But to other cultures, that's like a big no-no, and that's wild. So it just depends on where your perspective is and where you personally draw the line, right? So like,
Yeah,
yes, I think that there are some things like having an orgy just outside, just whatever, is maybe a little on one side of it for me, sure, but none of it's bad. I think killing him is the only like bad thing that they did, and I don't think most of it's crazy.
it's all from a certain point of view, Nico. Why you got to be such a prude?
Okay, all right, sure. I'm the prude here.
I want to go ahead and dive into some themes now, and I'll lead with the big one. This movie kind of presents a conflict between Christianity and the old pagan traditional ways. This is a thing that we see throughout the world, realistically, between Christianity and, getting
The
rid of a
rest
lot
of
of
the
the European.
world.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say Christianity and a lot of the European pagan rituals, but also Islam and a lot of the pagan rituals that were there in the Middle East as well. So, my question is, do you think the movie does a good depiction of Christianity versus paganism?
Honestly, it the the officer's like Christian identity felt like such a non-issue to the islanders, and that's what made it more like ominous to me. Like he kept, throwing his toys out the pram
Oh,
almost every
Uh-huh.
other scene, and the islanders were just pretty much nonplussed with very few exceptions when he was actively threatening them. But like to me, it just made him feel even smaller and more insignificant when absorbed by this, well, cult. So the just minimization of his presence, I guess, theologically, sort of added to the overwhelming sense of otherness that it gave off.
Dan, theologically speaking, what'd you think of the theme?
I think it was a good depiction of Christianity versus other.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Select
protagonist,
your fighter.
struggling with like not understanding a different culture, a different religion, and not really
Yeah.
wanting to, and trying to sort of force his beliefs on other people. I mean, I think it was a good depiction of that.
Now, I want to go ahead and I also want to ask Nico, one movie that I think you and I both love, and Dan put it in the meh basket,
Mm-hmm.
is Midsummer.
I was
Now,
waiting for this.
having seen Midsummer and having seen this movie clearly is a heavy, heavy influence on Midsummer.
Oh,
in
yeah, for
particular.
sure.
And just in general, what elements from this do you see in Midsummer and maybe other movies?
There is a whole lot of Summer Isle in Jorge, and there is a whole lot of the people of Summer Isle also in Jorge. Like, all the fucking was happening in both of those movies. There was once again a sacrifice involving fire. There was someone from the outside looking into the culture, and it's just like even the overall like spirit of it, I think, is there. So like I don't think it personally makes Midsummer a cheaper experience, just because there is a similarity between things doesn't like lessen the second thing necessarily, but
Mhm.
that's just me.
Dan, what do you think about this movie's, I think, legacy with its depictions and how that went on to influence other films?
I mean, I think this is like the folk horror film, and I
Yeah.
think it really does influence everything. And I mean, specifically Midsummer, even the quote unquote plot twist, sort of the fact that the outsiders are the sacrifices.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That was pulled straight from this too, which kind of bummed me out that I saw Midsummer first. So I kind of like very, very early was like, oh yeah, he's going to be the sacrifice. If I hadn't seen Midsummer first, I probably wouldn't have known that until near the end.
Mm.
I think Midsummer specifically is very much pulled from this, and just in general, folk horror is this was sort of the foundation.
I want to get your take now on something that Christopher Lee has been on record as saying. First, he says that he considers this to be one of the best movies he's ever made.
When is that dated? That's very important for me. Is it before or after Lord of the Rings?
I believe it was after.
Wow.
I could look it up, but I believe it was after. It was a real retrospective kind of look back. And also, just as a little piece of trivia, he did this movie for free.
Did he really? Wow.
Yes. The story goes that he was so trying to get away from being cast as Dracula over and over and over again that he was willing to do anything. So this movie represented such a breath of fresh air that he pounced on it, immediately pounced on it. But
Wow.
what I really want to ask you about is something that he noted in an interview, I believe this is maybe 2012-ish, where he says that he never considered this movie to be horror. See, even Christopher Lee every now and again asked the question, is it horror?
What the fuck did he consider it?
Unclear, because he chastised a couple of reporters for not knowing their shit. But
I mean, fair if you're Christopher Lee, yeah.
But I just want to know, is folk horror always horror? And is this folk horror?
I don't know how to answer that without having seen the entirety of the folk horror catalog. So, yes, this is horror and this is folk horror to your two questions.
Yes, I think it's horror, but I don't think it's like out and out horror. And I think that folk horror doesn't always have to be horror. Well,
But it's got it in the name, though.
yeah. So I guess if we're going to classify it as folk horror, it is horror. But that whole genre sometimes may not actually be horror, because like I don't really consider Midsummer all that horror-y personally, and even this is like teetering on the edge. So I don't know. Like I think it like just gets into horror, but it's weak to me.
Agreed. And one thing that I will say as well, especially when it comes to this movie, and I hate to say Midsummer, but Midsummer, there's a lot of life in these movies. Nico mentioned the island feels lived in, but it's not just the island. It's also the culture. Like, this is an active way of life. We see people young and old embracing it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really, really important, because now when we look at other horror movies, there's not always the same. Even I think when I first saw Midsummer, this is before we even did the podcast, and I talked with Nico about it, and I said, man, just the colors, like you don't get those colors in horror. And this movie was the same. Like, you don't get a lot of those sweeping scenic landscapes. I mean, yes, the things like The Ritual had landscapes,
Or elder
but it
gods.
wasn't the same.
Or other gods? Outer gods?
Older
Something.
gods.
Older gods.
Older gods.
Older gods. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's always interesting. And again, I don't think the purpose of the movie is to scare people as much as it is to tell the tale.
Agreed.
Which I think brings me to my last question. If you could take one moral away from this movie, what would it be? Or one lesson?
Fuck bitches, stay alive.
Quite literally, yeah.
When you're right, you're right.
Yep.
Like, that first night, if I was woken up by this, max volume arias and dirges and shit, I would be like, ayo, one, shut the fuck up, please, and thank you. But then two, I would open the door and be like, oh, what's your whole fucking situation? And then it would turn into a fucking situation.
He loves bad bitches. That's his fucking problem, I think. And I'll say my moral is, if you're an outsider refusing to get in, then you got to get out. And that's really what it is.
I'm going to rephrase your question here real quick, or alter it. You said, what's one moral we could take away from it? Well, I'm going to take away. Here's one thing that I want to take out of the film and toss in the garbage.
Oh, okay.
That part where he's going into the inn and they're all suddenly like, here's a very specific song about fucking my daughter that we all know and sing around the island time. We sing it every day, and yes, we sing it every night. It is about the fucking, it's just about this girl, this one individual person. It is her. Oh, Heidi, fucky, 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 fuck. That's basically what was happening, and don't either of you deny it.
No, that's, yeah.
I'm going to come in here and say this.
Pause.
Poor choice of words. So, I think that there are a lot of songs like that, detailing an innkeeper's daughter or an innkeeper's wife. There are a lot of songs like that in tradition.
Certainly, but it's more archetypical and less like this one individual person.
She seemed to be having a great time in the song.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
So maybe it's just like, you love us, we love you, we sing a song. And it's just like, I guess, because I mean, I think they're over here like, I hate to say it, I'm trying to be professional. They're free fucking everywhere they can.
Seems
And
that way.
I guess it's not a big deal. It's really not. Don't know how they don't have more kids on this island, but yeah.
Well and truly.
What a segue, Nico. Not even a segue. What a thought process. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I want to take it now to the what would you do? And this is going to be wild. Just please restrain yourself.
The barkeep's daughter, I guess.
You are Sergeant Howie, and you are tasked with finding this girl. What would you do differently from our main character? And do you see yourself living, and do you see yourself accomplishing your goal?
So much about the person that I am is antithetical to the character of Sergeant Howie.
I was going to say that too, yes.
Like, in every single way. Like, the thought of me turning into someone who works for a police department makes me want to commit alivant. Among other things, and just like, so one, I just would not be in this situation in the first place, but if I was somehow turned into some weird circumstance where I was looking for a missing girl on this island, and the moment that I left would be when I get out of the inn. Like, the inn and the song would be really weird, but not enough for me to, like, stop my mission. I still have enough respect for, you know, work integrity, my work ethic to continue on. But once I walk outside and I see it's just, oh, look at the time, it's Fuck City, that's when I'm gone.
And I couldn't blame you for that.
I feel like maybe halfway through the movie, I would just give up. I'd be like, all right, well, I got this anonymous letter, but nobody on this island seems to give a fuck that this girl is dead. So who's complaining about her being dead? Like, she just seems like a dead person. There's a lot of dead people. So, like,
I want to change my answer. You mentioned something really quick. He got an anonymous letter. I would take handwriting samples of each and every single islander and start comparing, see who originally penned the letter.
So, not that I would go that far, but Nico, I agree with what you've said. I thought personally, one of the number one things you would do is you would try and find out who gave you that letter. That is of the utmost importance. And that was such a rookie mistake on his part that he didn't do that. So I think for me, what I would do is when I arrive on the island, I'd ask around. But once I realized they're stonewalling me, which again, rookie mistake, guy. Like, if you have a picture of the girl and she's from this island where no one pretty much comes and goes, where everyone comes and goes, and then now she's gone. Okay. I mean, it was dead dog ass easy to just find the fucking register and realize she was a real person. Like, how was the school not one of the first places you checked? And like, you went to go ask like rando, like old ass dudes, but you don't want to go ask the school marm.
I don't know.
Come on.
I mean, yeah, he asked random ass dudes because they were literally the first people and greeted him when he came onto the island. And then he went to
some of those dudes were
her
cheese
mother.
Hardcore, by the way.
Right.
Like, not even trying to pretend that they were bald-faced lying to him.
It was like when you ask someone, like, are you high? No.
No. What do you mean?
And they'll like tell each other, like, oh, she doesn't exist. Yo, bro, she doesn't exist, right? No, she definitely doesn't exist to me.
Oh, she doesn't exist at all.
No, I mean, I take your point, Dan, but I feel like I would have prioritized the school after landing. I feel like he had some time to kill between then and going to the inn for the joyous song.
You'd go to the school before going to her mom?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Because once people started saying she doesn't exist, I'm going to be like, yo, I can go see her mom anytime. That school probably is going to close soon. So I'm going to go to the school first. And I'm going to see
Good point.
like what's really going on here.
You
Because
don't know what the fuck time he got there?
I know, I do actually.
At what time?
He got there around noon.
How do you know that?
Position of the sun.
Okay.
Which we only ever see at the end of the movie during a sunset.
More on our detective podcast later. But no, I would have done that first. I would have slept with the barkeeper's daughter, that I would have questioned why she was like already naked by the time I walked into the room. And I would have probably, when they were doing their little ritual for like the fertility thing, I probably would have shouted like, does that actually work? And then once Lord Summer, whatever the fuck, was like, this is what we do, I'd be like, oh shit, I'm down. Let me just go grab my shit from the plane and then leave. And then I would have gone and I would have gotten some fucking backup. I would have been like, yo, shit is crazy on that fucking island. How do you guys not know about this?
Oh, so now it's crazy, Justin. Now it's crazy.
I mean, when I listen to a song, sometimes I'm like, that's crazy. It could be good. It could be bad. But it is outside of our norm in Scotland.
Sure, yeah.
Were you disappointed, Nico, by the lack of the Scottish accent?
I actually really was, yes. It was all very, like, high-class British and posh and just, like, I wish we could have heard some more of the perhaps oft described as a lilting Scottish accents.
No ogres in this swamp for you.
No, unfortunately not.
So I want to go now to the critical review. What do you guys think this has from critics on Rotten Tomatoes?
I'm going to say an 85.
I'm gonna guess low. I'm gonna say like a 44.
Yep.
Nico, you are wrong. Dan,
Good.
91%.
Wow.
91%. Audience score right up there at 82. Give me your take. What's your score? What'd you like? What'd you not like?
I thought this movie was okay. I'm not, and I think I may have mentioned this in Midsummer review. I can't quite remember, but
Among others.
folk horror isn't really my thing. I don't really like it. I can't really describe why, but it's just not my steez. So off rip, it just kind of didn't really do much for me. It's definitely a slow burn. And again, I think Midsummer kind of spoiled the movie a little bit for me. So overall, it was fine. I'm going to give it a 70. Oh, I also kind of to the point of folk horror, one thing that I don't really like, I guess, about folk horror, or at least this subgenre of it or whatever, portrayal is I'm not the biggest fan of the whole like different culture being like horrific because again, like I don't think a lot of this movie was horrific or crazy or anything like yes, there are orgies and shit. Like, yes, that's a little wild, but like it's not scary. And it's not like, oh my God, these people are evil and oh, there's something clearly wrong here, kind of thing, you know?
Sure.
And I just the whole concept of I'm going over to a different culture's area and being like, oh, this is all wrong. I fucking hate this. They have to be killing people.
Right.
Just I don't know. I don't really fuck with that too much. But yeah.
All right. Agreed. Fuck the colonialism.
Yep.
And for me, I actually like the movie quite a bit. It's an 84 for me. And I like the culture. Not saying I'm like part of that, but I like the culture. I like the portrayal of it. I like everything they're doing. I didn't like Howie. I thought he is an absolute caricature of a forthright Christian man. You know, he don't fuck. He just don't. And he is offended at everything. And I wish there would have been someone a little more open, because I think it's easy to destroy a straw man, but I think a real person that kind of goes and slowly, like, I guess, comes to the conclusion that these are all bad people. I think Howie thought that almost immediately when he saw the orgy. And I think someone else would have been a little bit different. Personally, that's what I think. Also, the Wicker Man comes the fuck out of nowhere. I want to know when they built that shit. Because, I mean, I guess they might have had it ready, like, in the cut, because they planned everything out and, like, manipulated him. But what was that conversation like? All right, guys, like, we're going to have to burn someone alive. Wait, what? And I just want to know. But one thing that Christopher Lee said is the movie could have been better if it was longer. And part of me does kind of agree with that a little bit. I think if there was a little more in this movie, I think it might have been better. But like I said, 84 for me.
I largely agree with you, Justin. I'm going to put it at an 85. I had a really good time with this, and I think what they portrayed was, similar to what y'all were both saying, like, just interesting to see. And yeah, I liked it.
All right. So, are we going to recommend this movie?
I would.
Me too.
Yeah, I think I would. Yeah.
But, Dan, giving your higher pitch of your voice there, it sounds as if that was a thought process, meaning it's not going to get the golden seal from you, is it?
No,
It wouldn't for
golden
me
seal
either.
from me.
Nico, you said not you either?
Nah.
Not for me either. So yeah, but we want to hear your thoughts. Do you know about this movie, about this culture? You want to talk to us about it? We're here for that. We're on X and Instagram at DOTD Horror. We're also on Facebook. That's Don't Open That Door. Plus, you can check out everything we've done on our website. That is dotdhorror.com. And if you like us or hate us, drop a review. Give us a share. That's right. Share people you hate. And every little bit helps. I will say, though, take care of one another. Try to grow your crops maybe without human sacrifices. But as always, dear listener, don't open that door. Bye.